Tony Stewart clowns on NASCAR. Old Smoke has found his Twitter password again and is back. And you wouldn't believe it, he's firing shots at NASCAR. So we're going to talk about that, as well as some more news and notes from around the motorsport world. And we'll begin with some more fallout from yesterday's clash between Bubba Wallace and Kyle Larson. Now, while we don't yet know if any penalties will be coming through, though we will probably know as early as tomorrow whether or not Bubba Wallace will be penalized for what appeared to be a pretty blatant intentional wreck, right rearing Kyle Larson into the wall at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. It took less than 24 hours for someone to use it in promotional material, and the award goes to Las Vegas Motor Speedway, who used it in this now deleted tweet, which looks like it came out of a parody boomer Facebook group. But shout out to Ethan for coming in clutch with not only a screenshot, but proof that I bookmarked it to talk about later. Now, is it shocking that we've immediately seen people, particularly, tracks or NASCAR themselves, using an accident which, on its face was extremely dangerous and potentially reckless? No, because I'm pretty sure they used Ryan Newman's crash footage. I think they waited at least a week on that one before that started airing in promos, but not a shock. Now, from a penalty perspective, I'm curious what they will do, if anything, to Bubba Wallace. I think there's a chance that he gets off completely scot-free, whether it's through the appeals process or whether NASCAR chooses to just do nothing. I think what we're really going to see is probably a monetary fine and a points penalty. But frankly, I think I will agree with many of the chorus that's out there that probably Bubba needs to be suspended for this one. I think NASCAR needs to establish some order here, especially with the way the next-gen car is and where it is currently safety-wise. I don't think you can be doing... Frankly, I think I even said that the 24 of William Byron should have been parked when he crashed Denny Hamlin under the yellow flag. I have a zero-tolerance policy for this stuff. I understand it's a little bit different for hardcore stock car fans. I think some people like some intentional wrecking, but I think I've never seen NASCAR Twitter quite as unified as it was yesterday, that something has to be done. So we'll see if NASCAR fumbles the ball or not. We got a couple of IndyCar things to talk about. First of all, sky is blue, water's wet, grass is green, and Marco Andretti confirmed he will be back in the Indy 500 entry list for 2023, but you would have already known that if you'd watched my video from earlier in this week. It's going to be the same driver, car, team, sponsor combination as last year, so consistency for Marco Andretti at the Indianapolis 500. Now, how about a landmine? Since Track Forum liked my last landmine about Chip Ganassi so much, here's another one. Sounds like Chip Ganassi Racing has hired Nicholas Latifi to drive their fourth car in IndyCar in 2023. Now, from my understanding, it's unclear whether it's full-time or not. I think a lot of people would kind of jump to the conclusion, myself included, that it will be a road course heavy schedule for Nicholas Latifi. I know there's a rumor about Jimmy Johnson potentially doing the Indy 500, at least for Chip Ganassi Racing, maybe a partnership with Trackhouse. But at least my source seems to be under the impression that Nicholas Latifi would be a full-time, including ovals and the Indy 500, driver for Chip Ganassi Racing. So make of that what you will. Now, certainly Latifi comes with a boatload of Canadian cash that would shore up the finances at Chip Ganassi Racing. As we know, there's a slight issue there. Not a huge deal, but certainly if you want to run 4 cars, you need 4 full-time budgets, and Latifi would help with that. Also, in case you're curious, the car number that Latifi will supposedly use is number 11. So maybe, gentlemen, start your speculations on a Tony Kanaan Indy 500 ride in the 11 car. But we'll have to wait and see. That's what I've heard. Latifi making a move to IndyCar in 2023 with Chip Ganassi Racing. Now, to the Twitter drama with Tony Stewart. Yep, he's at it again. He found the Twitter password. He's going at it. This first tweet comes from a completely unrelated source, Amateur NASCAR. And it's just a funny little tweet. I actually saw it earlier this morning, and so did Kevin Harvick, as you can see. Breaking. Upon further review of the Bubba Wallace-Kyle Larson incident, NASCAR has elected to fine Rodney Childers $100,000 and take Kevin Harvick's birthday away. We'll have more on this developing story. Pretty funny tweet, there's no doubt about it. I got a good chuckle out of it, and I think it does a couple of things pretty effectively. Number one, the tweet points out that perhaps Kevin Harvick was penalized unjustifiably. We've talked about that before. But also the fact that a lot of people are not expecting Bubba Wallace to get much, if any, penalty for yesterday's incident. Well, enter Tony Stewart. Tony Stewart then took a screenshot of the tweet and reposted it with this caption. For a moment, I actually thought this was true. This didn't come from me, though, he says, deflecting the blame away from himself for lollygagging and shenanigans on Twitter. But on a more serious note, and we talked about this yesterday, this tweet comes on the heels of Gene Haas mentioning that Kevin Harvick already has his exit strategy for NASCAR set, as well as the Tony Stewart comments from last week, just pretty much going off on NASCAR about penalties to the 4 and 41 cars over the past few weeks. And, I guess we'll keep up with this narrative. It sure does seem like Tony Stewart is fed up with NASCAR. He even went so far as to say in the Forbes article last week that he's having way more fun in the NHRA. And, I think it was Brian Keselowski who followed that up by saying that the reason Dodge is sticking with NHRA instead of NASCAR is that they're continuing to increase horsepower in the NHRA rather than decrease horsepower. But I'm beginning to buy into the meme. Like there was a point where like you see Tony Stewart's upset, and like Tony Stewart's barked a lot in the past, right? Like I remember at one point he said he would dismount every single car he owned that had Goodyears on it and put Hoosiers and Firestones on his car. I don't know if he actually did that, but those are the kind of things Tony Stewart said throughout his driving career. But the more and more Tony Stewart begins to tweet, and remember, Tony Stewart doesn't really run his Twitter account. He kind of says, I'd like to tweet about this, and then either his wife or his social media team goes ahead and tweets it for him. So there are people, like I said in the previous video, that look at Tony Stewart's tweets and say, Tony, do we really need to be saying this? Tony says yes, and they say, okay, I guess we'll tweet it. Okay? So anything that Tony Stewart puts out on his Twitter is very, very, processed and not fact-checked, but but looked at by a PR professional and says, should we really be tweeting this? And when the answer is yes, stuff is going down, especially when it's memes like this. So I begin to think that maybe, especially now with Kevin Harvick talking about leaving, or not talking about, but Gene Haas talking about that Kevin Harvick wants to leave and they're trying to get him back. But let's be honest, do you really think Kevin Harvick's coming back? I personally don't think so. And that also makes me think, now that Tony Stewart's really starting to air some grievances, and we'll see how the end of this season goes, and then, of course, 2023, I wonder if Tony Stewart will be out as well as Kevin Harvick. Maybe Ryan Preece is the last straw for Tony Stewart. If Ryan Preece doesn't end up in a cup ride pretty soon, and let's say, for example, Hailie Deegan replaces Kevin Harvick rather than Ryan Preece, I wouldn't be surprised to see Tony Stewart step away. Now, a lot of people have brought up Tony Stewart come to IndyCar. First of all, if he wants stress-free living, IndyCar ain't the place for Tony Stewart. Yeah, it's a pretty high-stress environment. Lots of BS going on there as well. But I kind of feel like, because I was, believe it or not, watching a Kamikaze Games NASCAR Thunder 2004 stream last night, because that's the kind of Sunday night living I'm doing these days. But one of the things that came up that has been talked about a couple times is like the trying to meme into existence Tony Stewart going to IndyCar, buying out AJ Foyt Racing. I kind of almost feel like that's one of those things that's going to happen just because people keep saying it's going to happen. It's kind of like Roger Penske buying the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. It's like, yeah, a lot of people said, oh, yeah, kind of offhandedly, Roger will buy the Speedway someday. And then eventually it actually did happen. And then, surprise Pikachu face, be careful what you wish for sort of thing. So Tony Stewart coming to IndyCar, Tony Stewart leaving NASCAR, I'll believe it when I see it. But the more and more people talk about it, I'm beginning to think it might actually happen. And if that happens, good Lord, Katie bar the door, because who knows what's coming next. There's a lot of unrest, as we know, in NASCAR. We're going to have to see where it all ends up folding out. I think we're going to probably get our answer on Bubba Wallace tomorrow. If not tomorrow, then Wednesday. So look out. More coming. Subscribe for more. Thank you, guys. This has been David Land on YouTube, and I'll see you in the next video.